welcome to another amazing episode of Say It Online, where we help digital agency owners stop just randomly shouting into the void and start communicating meaningfully and effectively in this digital age. I'm your host, Say Gabriel, and this episode was brought to you by our sponsor, Anansi Content. If you're sick of conversion content being a huge pain in your agency's butt, especially websites, campaigns, etc., let's talk. With the smoothest content process ever, a team of unbelievably skilled and organized content strategists, and years of subcontracting experience, Anansi is looking to make your life as a digital agency owner unbelievably easier. Just head, if you're interested, to anansicontent.com, that's ANANSI content.com, and hit Let's Talk. And now, without further ado, here's our episode. Hey guys, I've got another special treat for you today, which is another solo episode with me, Say. So you're going to get to dig into my brain a little bit here with one of the many kind of frameworks and simple concepts that are at the root of a lot of the business strategy and marketing strategy that we do both for ourselves and the business. Today's topic is a concept you may or may not have heard of before, but basically it's called the Ooda Loop. Now, an Ooda Loop is, it's basically an acronym. It stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. Now, this actually comes from the military. I did not hear about this in any relevance to the military at all when I first heard it. I heard it from a business mentor of mine. But it actually comes from a gentleman named John Boyd in the military. And this is something that if you look it up in military circles, I think gets a lot of bad rap because there's all this conversation about getting inside the other person's Ooda Loop and all this stuff. But really, in the concept of business, I think it's a really good way to break down the concept of iterative action. That is to say, the act of acting more than once, like taking an action more than once and shifting the way you approach it each time. Iterative. I love that word. I love that concept. And today I want to talk about how an iterative model like the Ooda Loop really starts to gain power when you're doing growth-based activities as opposed to one-off activities. And in fact, growth-based activities really need to be done in a cycle, in my opinion, in order to be done well and effectively. And we'll get into what that means. Now, if you've listened to any of my other episodes that have to do with growth strategy versus, other parts or other types of services that you might offer for a client, then this won't be totally new to you. But I like to break down the type of services that we as agency leaders or as agencies provide into two general categories. I guess three general categories if you count kind of the initial strategy work. So our process at Anansi is broken down into three steps: messaging anchors, foundation copy, and growth strategy. And these three concepts are separated because they take a different type of work and approach. Now, those first two steps, the strategy and the foundation copy, they're really meant to be the minimum viable product of what you need to get going. And I think that this applies to a lot of different marketing assets or marketing collateral, right? You need to put it out there. You need to do the work to create it so that it exists so that you can share it with people can find it. This is where I think the myth of if you build it, they will comes from. But that's a myth because I don't know about you, but in this ultra cluttered world, just building it usually isn't enough. You have to get it in front of the right eyes, and it has to have real value for those eyes, or at least you need to be able to sell the idea of real value, even if it doesn't provide it. But here in the world of ethical marketing, we make sure that it always provides real value, and that's what we're selling. Okay, so these types of things are one and done. And a lot of clients tend to believe that after you've done one and done something, that it will just kind of take off. And that's all you really need. And if they already have some source of traffic, basically some source of new eyes on them and on their thing, then all you really have to do is make sure it's easy to understand what it is that they do, who it's for, how it helps, and make sure that the people who are coming are the right people, and maybe tune that in a little bit more. But if you're like many of our clients out there, and you're really looking to build those traffic sources, you don't already have them, that's where the idea of an Ooda Loop comes in handy, because just doing something and putting it out into the world is almost never enough. What I've come to experience, and this isn't just for marketing related stuff, this is for operational related stuff as well, is that the idea of iterating, of doing it, basically seeing how it works and trying it over again is so powerful, because then the strength lies in your creative problem solving and your capacity to adapt. And also, if we're talking on a pure mental level, the pressure just isn't as strong. And while a little bit of pressure can be good, a lot of pressure can become crippling. It can really just keep you from being afraid to move forward. And this is where the idea of perfectionism comes in, right? Now, I'm a big fan of excellence over perfection. Done is the new perfect, and fail fast are things that you'll hear at Anansi just all the time, because we're all perfectionists. And it's not that we want to be putting half-assed stuff out into the world, is that if we wait for something to be perfect before having the courage to put it out into the world, then we're not putting very many things out into the world, because our standards are very high for perfection, and very few things ever achieve perfection. So that brings us back to this cyclical or iterative model. So the concept of iteration on its own is really just about doing something over and over again. Now, it doesn't really speak to the pulse of how often you're doing it. Often when something's iterative, it just means that you're open to fixing problems as they come up. You're open to doing a second version. You know, you have a sale, you do the sale, you figure out, okay, what worked and what didn't work with our marketing, with our promotion, with our ads, etc. You do another sale. That's the idea of iteration. The idea of an Ooda Loop now brings in the concept of rhythm to iterations. Something that, actually not a business mentor, but I'm a huge fan of ecology and permaculture. And one of the things that comes up there is that the idea of a season or a cycle is an opportunity in time. I'm going to repeat that. The idea of a cycle or a season is an opportunity in time. That means that naturally things are changing in such a way as to give you a certain space or a certain opportunity to change things on a regular basis. So in order to be able to take advantage of these natural opportunities to change things, you basically need to be ready, because that window is usually fairly small. Like, for example, just to kind of keep that gardening analogy going, if I want to plant peas, for example, I have a fairly limited window in which I can do that. There are some things that you can kind of plant all the time, but I can't just plant peas in September and expect that I'm going to be eating them in December or something. I can't necessarily plant them in December. They're not going to grow. It's cold here. There's often the ground is frozen, so it's not going to work. So the advantage of looking at your iterations in terms of a rhythm is that you don't really have to kind of guess and be like, oh shit, I think here's my window, I'm going to dive in there, woohoo. You can be like, oh, okay, the opportunity is coming. I'm going to prepare for it. I'm going to get all my data in order so that I can take advantage of this opportunity. I can decide differently. Now, different marketing activities usually exist on some sort of rhythmic scale. And if your marketing stuff doesn't exist on some sort of rhythmic scale, then I strongly encourage you to implement some rhythmic stuff in there. And so that you get that you can take advantage of this opportunity, because you can't take advantage of this opportunity if it's not there. Even if you're, say, just doing a Christmas sale every year or something, that is an example of a rhythm that is an annual rhythm, because that same opportunity is going to come up that has all of the same context or similar context, but it's not going to come up again for another year. So that's going to change things, basically. Now, when my mentor presented this concept to me, he basically used different activities as examples. So one of the things that he gave an example of, okay, let's use, I don't remember what he originally used, but let's use the example of a Christmas sale. So if we're looking at an Ooda Loop, so let's break down Ooda Loop. That's observe, orient, decide, and act. That is a whole Ooda Loop is basically the length of your cycle before an opportunity comes up again. And we'll get into what those individual things in the Ooda Loop mean. But for now, let's just look at how long the Ooda Loop is. So at Christmas, if we're doing something that's at Christmas, that's really just once a year. So it's an annual Ooda Loop. But let's say we're doing, Facebook ads. Now, Facebook ads, you can pretty much log in almost every day and see what has happened that day. Now I'm not a Facebook ads expert. This is just the example he used. There's lots of other kind of things that have much, much shorter Ooda loops, but the potential advantage here, and as always, this is not, this is only an advantage if you leverage it correctly, is that when we're doing a conference, for example, this is an Ooda Loop that we use, right? If we're doing a conference can be extremely, extremely, extremely profitable for us. The connections that we make, not just honestly on a sales and account management level, but in terms of the stuff we learn, the channel partners, etc., it can be very powerful. But just to give you an example, I went to a conference in 2019 in Denver in the fall, and two key things happened that basically messed it up for me. One is that the place that we were staying, there was a mix-up with the rooms, and instead of having 3 beds for our 3 people who were sharing this space, we basically had 2 beds and a couch that wasn't really comfortable to sleep on. It did not have, it was like a recliner couch kind of thing. So it was terrible to sleep on. The stress from this, as well as me as the third person having to basically not having a room with a shut door when already I struggle from insomnia and all this other stuff, basically pushed me over the edge where I was almost incapable of functioning by day 3. I had to totally skip out of day 3 of the conference. We had brought along an account manager with us who basically also didn't work out, in the sense that, I extended trust in terms of letting her kind of take the initiative there. And in that case, it just didn't work out. So from this experience, I had a ton of new learnings. I had a ton of observations. I had a ton of new ways to kind of orient myself to that information, ways to kind of filter it and analyze it, enrich my next experience. I definitely knew that there were some decisions I was going to make differently. But our next opportunity for a conference wasn't coming up until at least the spring. And our next opportunity to come to that conference wasn't coming up until September or October again. So that opportunity, while it wasn't wasted, it just did not deliver, and it cost us a lot. And those were things basically that were to some degree outside of my control, at least in the context of that particular event. And here we are in 2020. And let me tell you, we did not go to a conference in the spring, and we are not going to a conference this fall. And we're probably not going to a conference next spring either, just because of the state of the world. They've all been canceled. Also, we are in Canada. A lot of the conferences we go to are in the USA, and the border is closed. So why am I sharing all of this? Hopefully through listening to this, you can start to get the idea that an Ooda Loop that's shorter, let's say, for example, live training. Let's say we have a funnel that revolves around digital live training, and we're doing a live training every month. Well, now all of a sudden, in the same amount of time where I would have been able to do 1 Ooda Loop or maybe 2 for conferences, we have 6 or 12 opportunities to iterate on that. And a key thing here is that we're not just restarting things every month and being like, okay, we're going to just try something new and go for something new. There's a cycle here that means that we have an amount of time that we're relatively aware of, and some accountability that's outside of ourselves where we know that we're going to have to act again. Again, that opportunity in time. So you might be listening to this and thinking, oh, okay, so marketing activities with faster OODA loops are by nature better. That's not always the case. That's not what I'm saying here. Basically, opportunities vary according to a number of different factors. One of the key ones being the speed of trust. Now, we can do these live trainings, but the speed of trust compared to a live event, one of the reasons we go to live events is because it's just night and day. Like, we can build trust with people 10 times faster, talking to them one-on-one in person, getting to kind of see each other and see each other's faces and shake hands and share in each other's energetic spaces than we can on a live training, where we still have to kind of recruit those people who are going to come before we get to the more face-to-face. And then that face-to-face is going to be through Zoom or whatever. Anyway, so faster is not always better, but breaking down the basically elements of an OODA loop and making sure that you're leveraging them correctly, that combined with keeping to the shortest OODA loop that works for your resources and the opportunities that you're building is really what we found to be maybe not the secret sauce to success, but boy, does it frickin' help. All right, so let's dig in a little bit more to the 4 components of an OODA loop. So once again, OODA, OODA, that's observe, orient, decide, and act. So first, let's start with observe. So observe, I love this because this is data. This is all about data collection. You know, if you're doing a marketing campaign, a more traditional marketing campaign, or building a funnel or something like that, this can be just the very concrete data you're collecting from Google Analytics, such as bounce rate, time spent on page, conversion rates, click-through rates, those kinds of things. But this can also be, and often is, just looking at the situation as it is, looking at the data in front of you, and it's not always numbers data. So, for example, if we're going through our growth strategy process, our observation phase starts with a form and deep dive. And keeping in mind, this is an initial observation phase. This isn't perhaps the regular OODA loop. And I do want to say it's okay to need a little bit more input at the beginning before you get into those cycles, right? So for us, we'll start by gathering and observing basically as much data as possible. We want to know where you collect your data from. We want to know how often you're checking it. We want to know what your goals are. And quite often we'll get a goal that is conversion. People want more conversion. But when we're looking at things, conversion is not always the first step. You can't just go immediately to conversion. You need traffic, you need engagement, you need other things other than just, I mean, who are you going to convert if no one's showing up, right? So it's our job to filter and analyze and orient ourselves to that data that we're looking at. We can say, okay, well, the client's collecting this info, these numbers, they really want conversion. Realistically, what are we looking at? How possible is this? What needs to happen for us to get there? That's the orientation phase. And it's really, really important to do this before you make any major decisions or act on those decisions. Because otherwise, your decisions, so basically you're going to need more OODA loops to get to your destination. Your OODA loops aren't going to be effective for you to achieve your goal. Okay, so let's say, the initial phase for us in growth strategy is that the initial OODA loop that we go through. So we talk, we gather, we look at, we basically observe as much as we can. Then we orient ourselves and ask ourselves, what's the story here? What is this information telling us? What are some of the risks we're seeing? Then we decide on a course of action. This often has a discussion element to it. We are absolutely not just taking what the client wants and deciding how to get there. We are deciding on how can we support the client in achieving their long-term and short-term goals. And those two things aren't always the same thing, right? A client can try to dictate. In fact, I will say our least successful growth strategies have so far all been where the client or the partner tried to dictate, usually the client, who does not have this expertise, tried to dictate 100% of what things were going to look like, what the scope was going to be, what we were going to do for them. So basically, we're just the hands. And then they're like, well, why aren't you getting us the results we want? And it's like, well, we need to do more strategy, and then we start to ask them, okay, you wanted to do the strategy. How are you generating leads? What is this looking like? How are you driving traffic to this content, etc.? And then half the time they're like, oh, well, we thought you were doing that. So what I'm trying to get at here is that to be an expert, you need to be leading these decisions. You need to really constrain where you're giving opportunities for the client to decide stuff, because or else they'll decide. Oh boy, will they decide. And it's not necessarily going to be the decisions that you need, because they don't necessarily have the expertise that you need. Also, they don't necessarily understand the relationship between observing and orienting and deciding, because they might be observing the same thing, probably not because you're the expert, but they're definitely not orienting themselves to it in the same way, or else they wouldn't be hiring you. Okay, and last but not least is acting, which is executing the decision. So a lot of people get hung up on the decide phase. I kind of see people on two ends of the spectrum. Either people are acting, but they aren't really taking the time to observe and orient properly to inform their decisions before acting. Or on the other side of things, I see people, especially our direct agency clients. So this is probably looking at you, people who are listening to this podcast, and they often get stuck in decide mode. They observe and orient and try to make a decision, but they never quite get around to acting, or they only act on a fraction of the things that they're observing and orienting and deciding on. And in order for an OODA loop to fully be effective and complete, you need to also be acting. Inaction is an action, but it's making your OODA loops way longer and way less effective. So once you've decided, actually carry it through. Challenge yourself to not start the OODA loop over again until you have taken some sort of action, or alternatively, use the OODA loop model to understand, or to help your client understand, why action hasn't been taken or what's blocking you guys from achieving that action. But you're not going to start to be able to let these lead you closer and closer to your results and your goal until action is 100% part of it. And then what happens? Well, you go right back to the beginning. So once you've taken action, then you have the opportunity to go back and observe again. You let the action out, you do the action, observe the results. What new data do you have now? You're basically testing the hypothesis that you had in the decision phase, right? In the decision phase, you decided that, okay, maybe if we shift our audience a little bit this way, or we shift our blog topics, then maybe that'll create greater engagement, or maybe we're going to look at adding content upgrades. I've done lots of other episodes elsewhere about how to align your decisions with your goals and make sure that that's all kind of happening in the same direction. This is really about the cycle and the critical thinking process. If you know me at all, if you've listened to any of these episodes, you know that I absolutely love these strategy neutral approaches, in the sense that there's so many different strategies that you can take in order to be successful in your marketing or in your client's marketing, right? You could be working on SEO. You could be working on organic SEO. You could be working on PPC, you could be working on social stuff ranging from ads to organic traffic. You can be working on content marketing. You can be working on a combination of these. Maybe you're driving ad traffic to a funnel that, is centered around a keystone blog post that has an opt-in, and, there's lots of different things here. What I am seeking to do here, what Anansi, but what I as a leader am kind of seeing as the vision, is identifying where the blockages are that are common to so many different strategies or solutions, and making sure that we're helping you unblock those blockages and create awesome frameworks that can help you apply your strategy better. So the Ooda Loop framework is a tool. It's not the root of all of your marketing stuff, right? I do believe that almost all marketing activity should be on a cycle of some kind. There's always room for stuff to pop up opportunistically, depending on what's going on in the world, what's going on in your company, etc. But the true strength of marketing, especially for you to have a consistent funnel that consistently brings you or your clients in leads that are consistently being qualified and making you lots of money, making sure you understand the cycles inherent in whatever your main funnel is just going to 10x your results. And if you can build it in from the beginning, then it's going to reduce the amount of time that you spend in the iteration phase flailing around, not quite seeing results yet. So once again, make sure you're doing your marketing on some sort of a cycle. Try to bring in the concept of rhythms, of OODA loops, wherever you can, and ask yourself, how can I bring more critical thinking to this process? Am I observing everything? Have I missed something that maybe other people have observed, right? How am I actually orienting myself to the information that I've observed, right? This is crunching the data. What is the story behind the numbers, the story behind the facts that you're seeing? This is the kind of triage and prioritization phase. This is also where you make sure that you have all of your resources and are orienting yourself to all of your resources so you're not missing part of the picture. From the observation and orientation phase comes the decide. You should now be positioned to actually figure out what the appropriate response is. There are often lots of different options. This is really where your expertise comes in. And if you're bringing the client through this process with you, if you're effectively including them in the observation phase and you are being the guide rails for their orientation, then they will trust you in the decision phase much, 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 much more. And you'll be able to basically predict or give a just really educated perspective on what's going to happen next and what sort of results we can see. And then you're going to actually do it. You're going to delegate it. You're going to get it done. And you're going to actually be analyzing and assessing as you go whether your decision was correct and how you can possibly either improve efficiency on it if it was successful or tweak the factors in it to make it more successful if it was not successful. I would also suggest here that, especially if you're using this for marketing strategies, start with smaller goals and OODA loop your way up to kind of bigger successes and bigger goals, because then you'll be keeping yourself and them motivated with bigger and bigger wins throughout. And the idea is that you're never going to lose the OODA loop. The loop is a loop. It keeps going forever, basically. But hopefully future cycles will happen as time goes on more accurately and faster as you're able to more accurately make decisions and make them faster. And if you're doing OODA loops across a variety of different clients or a variety of different contexts, that will really only make it better. Now, the reason I love this is because making decisions is hard and there's so many different options out there. This is something that, you do have to have the expertise and do the work and practice in order to get better at it. It's not some magical thing that's going to solve your problems on its own, but it does help you make sure that you're not missing something in your decision making and that you are basically flexing your muscle of being able to identify data, crunch data, put data into action, and then analyze the results of that action. Anyway, hopefully this was useful for you, something you can use to achieve more success in the next round of decisions that you need to make. Hopefully after hearing this, you're going to be on the lookout for more cycles in more different contexts and more opportunities to gather and apply the data. Perhaps this will also help you, as it did with me, is to break out these individual parts of the process and not be tempted to kind of like snap decide things in a moment before I've had a chance to really look at the data and observe it. And hopefully this will help you explain to other people in your life, whether those are clients, whether those are teammates, whether that's even, the people you're reporting to or the people who report to you. This will hopefully give you a framework to start making better decisions faster when it comes to your marketing activities, and also to understand when and how you can make effective decisions, right? Because occasionally you do have to kind of just like trash everything and start over from scratch. But once again, there's opportunities in time here. A cycle is an opportunity in time. All right, guys, I hope this helped you out. Hope this gives you some more clarity. And more than anything, I hope you have an absolutely excellent rest of your day. And that does it for another amazing episode of the Say It Online podcast. Join us next week. And don't forget to like and subscribe, whether it's iTunes, whatever your favorite podcast player is. It is always, always appreciated. It really makes a difference for us. It helps us get this word out to more people. As always, this episode was brought to you by our sponsor and Say's own business, Anansi Content. If you're a digital agency owner and you're still wasting too much time chasing down content that maybe isn't even all that great, let's talk. We've spent years working on the best process for selling, planning, and delivering amazing conversion content for your client projects. Better yet, we moosh our process to yours so that your client and you have a seamless and amazing experience the entire time through. If you're interested, just go to our website. That's www.anansicontent.com. That's ANANSI content.com. And just click Let's Talk. I'd love to chat with you. Someone else on the team would also love to chat with you too. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day.